The biggest lie we learn early on is simple and dangerous. If it worked, then it was right. But history and the body tells a different story. Many of the habits, products, and solutions we use today were born full of silent signs that something was wrong. In the beginning, there were warning signs: discomfort, strangeness, that unease that's hard to explain. But since it worked, almost everyone preferred to move forward and not just ignore the result, ignoring the process. The curious thing is that the body always notices first. The body's signals appear as doubt, hesitation, that feeling of "this wasn't supposed to be like this." These are early warning signs that emerge before logic kicks in. However, when the error generates immediate benefit, these initial symptoms are reinterpreted as a detail, a fine-tuning adjustment, or even the charm of the product. Thus, hidden symptoms become the norm, and no one questions them anymore. This is the trap. When something wrong works, it gets permission to continue existing, and the signals your body is giving you start to be treated as exaggeration, fussiness, or resistance to change. Today, you'll see clear examples of symptoms you shouldn't ignore, moments when we made big mistakes. But because it worked, we never stopped. Understanding this isn't about judging the past. It's about learning to identify now when what worked is hiding a bigger problem. Artificial sweetener. He often explains that artificial sweeteners were born as a convenient mistake, and the subtle signs of this appeared early on. At first, the warning signs were subtle: strange taste, temporary use, and exaggerated promises. Over time, early warning signs of automatic habit emerged when the palate adapted too quickly. The initial symptoms didn't cause pain, but they confused the perception of sweetness and satiety. Those who paid attention to their body's signals noticed more intense cravings after consuming the product. Many people ignore these warnings because they think, if it worked, it's valid. And so, the mistake became routine. He points out that the hidden symptoms were not on the label, but in daily behavior. When a person replaced sugar with sweetener, silent signs of dietary compensation emerged. The signals your body is giving you appear as hunger at odd hours or a search for more stimulation. A practical example is observing your own reaction after drinking 0 drinks. If the initial symptoms include an urge to pinch immediately afterward, something is out of whack. The mentor suggests testing short periods without sweetener to clearly read the body's signals. This small experiment reveals a lot. He jokes that the sweetener worked, but perhaps in the wrong way. Symptoms you shouldn't ignore include numbness of taste and displaced pleasure. When this becomes normal, the warning signs stop attracting attention. Still, the silent signals continue to operate behind the scenes. Don't ignore the difference between solving a problem and putting it off. Those who learn to read these hidden symptoms gain autonomy over their food choices, and this autonomy sets the stage for understanding why even celebrated toasts have also originated from curious deviations. Champagne. He often says that champagne is elegant proof that a mistake can become a symbol, and the silent signs were there from the beginning. When bottles started exploding in wine cellars, clear warning signs emerged that something had gone wrong. These early warning signs appeared as excessive pressure, flying corks, and frustrated producers. The initial symptoms were losses and damage, not celebration. But some realized, through the signals from their sensory bodies, that there was something special about that unexpected gas. Many chose not to ignore the problem and instead turned it into a competitive advantage, and the mistake gained notoriety. He explains that the secret was to observe instead of correcting in a hurry. While some tried to fix the wine, others read the silent signs of over-fermentation. The signals your body is giving you appear in the aroma, texture, and mouthfeel. A practical example is noticing how bubbles change the perception of taste and celebration. Hidden risk symptoms have turned into positive expectations, Don't ignore it when something imperfect generates real emotion. Sometimes the body understands before the technique. He jokes that nowadays nobody questions the method. They just toast to it. But the symptoms you shouldn't ignore were there: instability, unpredictability, and excessive pressure. When this worked, the warning signs lost their narrative power. Still, the silent signs remind us that tradition is also born from chance. Don't ignore the difference between a dangerous mistake and a fruitful mistake. Those who learn to separate the two create value where others see flaws. And this logic helps to understand why a grand quest ended up producing something far more explosive. The search for immortality that gave us explosions. He often says that the quest for immortality has always left silent signs of danger along the way. Alchemists and scientists pursued eternal life, while warning signs emerged in unstable mixtures. These early warning signs appeared as unexpected reactions, strange fumes, and uncontrolled heat. The initial symptoms didn't seem serious, but they indicated that something was going wrong. Those who listened to the body's signals, burning eyes, chest tightness, knew it was time to retreat. Even so, many did not ignore the greater promise and moved forward. And ambition paved the way for literal explosions. He explains that the mistake wasn't in trying, but in confusing persistence with stubbornness. When formulas sought the elixir, silent signs of excessive accumulated energy emerged. The signals your body was giving you were asking for a break, some breathing room, and some distance. A practical example is recognizing when a personal project is heating up too much without real progress. If the initial symptoms include constant fatigue and hasty decisions, something needs to change. Don't ignore hidden symptoms like dangerous shortcuts just because the goal is noble. Discipline saves more than blind courage. He jokes that immortality didn't arrive, but progress did, by the crooked route. The symptoms you shouldn't ignore were those in accidents that taught you physical limits. When it worked, the warning signs turned into engineering and safety lessons. Still, the silent signs remind us that great leaps come at a price. Don't ignore the difference between experimenting methodically and forcing results. Those who learn from these hidden symptoms create safer breakthroughs. And this reading prepares the mind to understand why even virtual characters teach so much about error and habit. Pac-Man ghosts. He often says that the ghosts in Pac-Man are a silent lesson in functional error, and the silent signs are in the player's repeated behavior. At first, the warning signs were clear: enemies that were too predictable, movements that were mechanical, and patterns that were easy to exploit. These early warning signs showed that something wrong was making the game too simple. The initial symptoms manifested as rapid boredom and a lack of real challenge. But the creators read the player's body language: tension, fright, instinctive reaction. Instead of fixing everything, they decided not to ignore the mistake. And the mistake turned into memorable artificial intelligence. He explains that the ghosts began to have intentional glitches. Each one developed a strange, almost human-like behavior, generating silent signs of unpredictability. The signals your body is giving you appear as a racing heart and quick decision-making. A practical example is noticing how fear increases when the pattern suddenly breaks. The hidden symptoms of a technical error turned into real emotion. Don't ignore it when something imperfect creates deep engagement. Sometimes the brain needs friction to engage. He jokes that today we call this design, but it was born out of limitation. The symptoms you shouldn't ignore were the bugs that kept the game alive. When it worked, the warning signs lost their problem status. Even so, the silent signs continue to teach us. Total control kills the surprise. Do not ignore the value of the controlled error. Those who understand this design, more human experiences. And this logic is repeated in something much more common than games, something that lives in almost everyone's refrigerator: cheese. He often says that cheese is one of the greatest happy accidents in history, and the silent signs were all there. Initially, the warning signs were obvious: spoiled milk, a strong smell, and a strange texture. These early warning signs indicated that something had gone wrong from a conservation standpoint. The initial symptoms were repulsion and distrust, natural instinctive reactions, but some observed the body's signals with more curiosity than fear. Instead of dismissing it, they decided not to ignore the transformation, and the mistake became ancestral food. He explains that fermentation always scares those who seek total control. When bacteria alter milk, silent signs of something amiss emerge. The signals your body is giving you appear in the aroma, the feeling of fullness, and even your mood after eating. A practical example is noticing how certain heavy cheeses cause different initial symptoms in each person. The hidden symptoms are not in the food itself, but in individual tolerance. Don't ignore how the body responds to fermented foods. He always gives honest feedback. He jokes that cheese is a luxury today, but it originated from a fear of wasting food. The symptoms you shouldn't ignore were persistent, as experienced by those who experimented carefully. When it worked, the warning signs became a culinary tradition. Still, the subtle signs remind us that not everything that smells strange is harmful. Don't ignore the difference between decomposition and transformation. Those who learn to read these hidden symptoms eat better and live better. And this attention to detail prepares the eye for a curious pleasure that also arose from mistakes and unexpected events. Bubble wrap. He often says that bubble wrap was born trying to solve the wrong problem, and the silent signs gave it away early on. At first, the warning signs were clear. Nobody wanted inflated wallpaper. These early warning signs appeared as market rejection and awkward laughter. The initial symptoms were business failure and stagnant inventory. But someone paid attention to the body language of people when they touched the material. Instead of giving up, they decided not to ignore that instinctive reaction, and the error found a new use. He explains that the satisfying crack was not in the product, but in the experience. When people squeezed the bubbles, silent signs of pleasure, relief, and momentary focus emerged. The signals your body is giving you appear as immediate relaxation and an involuntary smile. A practical example is noticing how, in moments of stress, the hands seek simple stimuli. The underlying symptoms weren't childhood symptoms, they were neurological. Don't ignore small, repeated bodily responses. They reveal real needs. He jokes that nobody taught bubble wrap how to work. It revealed itself. The symptoms you shouldn't ignore were in people's spontaneous reactions. When that worked, the warning signs disappeared from the conversation. Still, the silent signs continue to show that usefulness arises from observation. Don't ignore solutions that seem silly at first. Those who learn to read these hidden symptoms create more humane products. And this logic leads us to a tiny component that also solved one problem by creating another: the Phillips head screw. He often says that the Phillips screw is one of those cases where making a little mistake was exactly what made it work, and the subtle signs were in the design. When it was designed to slip out of the key when tightened too much, warning signs arose among those who wanted absolute control. These early warning signs appeared as complaints of slippage and loss of strength. The initial symptoms appeared to be a defect: stripped screws, tools slipping. But the signals from the workers' bodies said otherwise. Less excessive effort, less breakage, more speed. Instead of fixing it, they decided not to ignore the behavior, and the mistake became an industry standard. He explains that the escape was a disguised form of protection. When the torque became too high, silent signals appeared indicating an automatic shutdown. The signals your body is giving you appear as less fatigue and fewer accidents. A practical example is noticing how modern tools prioritize limits. not brute force. The hidden symptoms of controlled failure increased efficiency on a large scale. Don't ignore systems that make mistakes in order to protect them. They tend to last longer. He jokes that nowadays we curse Phillips when he escapes, but we forget the context. The symptoms you shouldn't ignore were due to excessive human tightness. When it worked, the warning signs lost their narrative importance. Even so, the silent signs continue to remind us that total control is dangerous. Don't ignore designs that embrace failure as part of the process. Those who understand this build safer systems, and this lesson sets the stage for something that literally goes wrong. To keep someone alive. The pacemaker. He often says that the pacemaker is one of the clearest examples of something that malfunctions on purpose, and the silent signs explain why. Initially, the warning signs were ethical and technical. Interfering with the natural rhythm seemed too risky. These early warning signs manifested as fear of dependence, failure, and loss of control. The initial symptoms were legitimate doubts, not outright rejection. But the patient's physical symptoms spoke louder than any theory. Instead of backing down, the doctors decided not to ignore what the body was showing, and the mistake became life support. He explains that the pacemaker doesn't replace the heart. It makes mistakes along with it. When the rhythm falters, silent signals emerge that the device interprets in real time. The signals your body is sending you appear in micro-variations, not in collapses. A practical example is how the device learns individual patterns, adjusting responses accordingly. The hidden symptoms weren't defects, they were constant feedback loops. Don't ignore systems that learn from failure. That's precisely why they save lives. He jokes that perfection was never the goal, adaptation was. The symptoms you shouldn't ignore were irregular heartbeats that were a warning sign. When it worked, the warning signs gave way to quiet confidence. Still, the silent signs remind us that fixing everything isn't always the answer. Don't ignore solutions that coexist with error. Those who understand this design more human-centered technology. And looking back, it becomes clear how many times we made mistakes and we kept going because somehow it worked out. Ultimately, the question that remains is not, does this work? It's at what cost? Because after seeing so many examples, it's impossible to deny the silent signs were always there, before success, before acceptance, before it became normal. There were warning signs, there was discomfort, there was that strange feeling that the body recognizes before the mind justifies it. The body's signals were never wrong. It's just that we only learned not to ignore them when it was already too late. When something goes wrong, it disguises itself as a solution. Initial symptoms cease to seem like a problem and are treated as a technical detail. Hidden symptoms are swept under the rug because the immediate result compensates. This is how bad habits become culture, shortcuts become the norm, and mistakes become tradition. And in this process, the symptoms you shouldn't ignore are normalized until they disappear from conversation, but never from the body. So here's the invitation, almost a personal challenge. What signals is your body giving you that you're rationalizing just because it's worked so far? In what areas of your life is the comfort of the result silencing early warning signs? Learning from these stories isn't about abandoning everything. It's about regaining the ability to question. If this kind of reflection has opened something up for you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. The next videos continue exploring these invisible patterns where mistakes go unnoticed precisely because they work.